my invitation has been the highlight of my year. Well, I'm glad, and it was my honor. And I also want to thank you, too, Mrs. Black, he said to Charlotte, for taking time to make the trip here. I know you live only about an hour and a half away, but I do still remember what it was like for my wife, God rest her soul, and how demanding a First Lady's schedule can really be. This is true, but unless our son Matthew needs me to be home to attend one of his football games or something else school-related, I pretty much travel with my husband to most of his out-of-town speaking engagements, which actually works out fine because Matthew loves staying with my aunt when we're gone, and Curtis doesn't travel nearly as much as he used to anyway. Curtis lifted a forkful of Caesar salad from his plate. No, these days I tend to turn down far more opportunities than I take on, but after traveling around the country for so many years, I eventually decided that I wanted to spend as much time as possible with my family. Totally understandable, Pastor Valentine said, and then looked at Alicia. So, Miss Alicia, and I guess I'm sort of changing the subject a bit here, but your father tells me that you've written the next worldwide bestseller. Alicia smiled. Well, I don't know about all of that, but I did just finish writing my first novel. That's really impressive. It takes a lot of patience and diligence to write a book, fiction or nonfiction, so I'm very proud of you. Thanks, Alicia said, smiling at him again, her stomach fluttering. She worked on it just about every single day over the last 6 months, and it's great, her father said. She definitely poured her heart into it, and that makes all the difference, regardless of what anyone is writing. It's really wonderful, Charlotte said. I read it in one sitting myself, the same as I do with all the other books I read by well-known authors. Pastor Valentine raised his eyebrows. Wow, then maybe I should read it too. That is, if you don't mind sharing it with me. No, I don't mind at all, and actually I would love to have someone else's opinion, someone who doesn't love me so unconditionally that they would tell me anything as long as it doesn't hurt my feelings. Everyone laughed, and then her father said, You're right, I do love you, but at the same time, I would never tell you something was good if it really wasn't. Pastor Valentine turned his attention to Alicia again. So you'll send me a copy next week? Yes, I'll mail it tomorrow, she said, and it was all she could do, not to blush like some teenage schoolgirl. She was pleased to know how interested he seemed to be in her work, but what she was most thrilled about was how interested he was in her, something she could tell more and more as they continued making eye contact. The chemistry between them was discreetly intense, and it was the reason Alicia suddenly realized something. J.T. wasn't just some man she was attracted to. It was true that she'd only known him for a few hours now, but at this very moment, she knew she was the man of his dreams. He was the man of her dreams. She knew it with all her heart. She knew that she was definitely going to be the next Mrs. J.T. Valentine, no doubt about it. And that's the prologue.
Thank you so very much for that, Ms. Roby.
You're
You've
welcome.
heard it here, folks. That's an excerpt from Ms. Kimberla Lawson Roby's book that will be dropping it like it's hot tomorrow. Be careful what you pray for. Thank you so much. You gave us such a nice background for us, and it's very conversational as well. I like that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That was excellent. Let me ask you, because I've got a few questions. Again, I want to say thank you to everyone that's in the chat room and everyone that's holding on the lines. Thank you for coming. If you're just tuning in, this is from the Heart and Soul Show. We've got our special guest today, Kimberla Lawson Roby. And I've got a couple of questions for you. I'm going to ask you a question from the chat room. Do you have any plans on having any of your novels evolve into a movie?
Yeah, that's always the hope and the prayer. But actually, One in a Million, that was my novella that came out in the summer of 2008. The rights were actually optioned by Lifetime. And so last spring, the script was actually complete. It's being written by Kate, I believe Lanier is her last name, but she's the woman who wrote Set It Off, What's Love Got to Do with It, Beauty Shop. Yeah, and so Lifetime, I think they wanted a couple of changes, and now, they're pretty happy with it. So I'm hoping that eventually we'll really be able to move along, pretty fast in 2010. It can be a lengthy process.
Yes.
I'm just hopeful that it happens a lot sooner rather than later. And then also have a director now who actually is bringing out a movie called The Preacher's Kid, Stan Foster, and so he is in the process and interested in buying the rights to Casting the First Stone, which is the first in the Reverend Curtis Black series. So I'm hopeful that all of that will work out as well.
Excellent, excellent. And that was the question for several people that were in the chat room. They're waiting for those movies. Well, things are going so well, and congratulations on your various awards, your 5-star reviews, and of course, the ultimate of being called a New York Times bestselling author. So let me ask you this, Kimberla. Do you feel that this is your life's purpose? I know it didn't start out that way for you,
right.
but do you feel that this is your life's purpose?
I honestly do, and I've taken a long look at that and thought, wow, there really have been signs from the time that I was even a child. And so I think we all have passions, whether we realize that we're passionate about something or not at an early age, and even sometimes when we're adults. We have passions, and we do have a purpose. There is always, each and every individual, there's a reason God has placed us on this earth, and there is something that we're supposed to be doing. And so I even have thought back to my early years as a child. I was that student who I'd get straight A's in all of my subjects, and then I'd get a D in conduct because my teacher said I talked too much.
I know, I did the same thing.
I always talked too much, and so my mom, when I was older, she said, that was always very difficult because it was kind of hard you had to punish you. I had to do that, but it's hard to punish a child who's getting straight A's because she's talking too much in class, but you just couldn't continue to disrupt the class, so you were always in trouble for it. And so she said, but she could remember, my third grade teacher, and I can remember seeing this on my little report card. She said, Kimberla is always talking. She talks way too much, and that disrupts the class, and, she knows it. But I will say that a lot of it is because she's explaining to the other students. She'll find a student to help get their work done as fast as she got hers done, so she'll have somebody to talk to. And so, it's like kind of hilarious when I think back to it. But I had a lot to say back then. I mean, I guess I said all of that to say, I had a lot to say. I always did throughout my childhood and even my adult life. And I thought about the fact that when I was getting ready to go to college, my mom said to me, make sure you take typing classes. And I had listened to her and took one in high school, but she said, no, even, while you're getting your 2-year degree, make sure you take advanced typing classes. And I thought, well, why? I'm not going to be a secretary. I'm going to have one. That's kind of how my thinking was at 18 years old. And so she said, no, you just should always have something to fall back on. I just really feel like you should do that. And my mom was a very wise woman, and as was my grandmother. I think about both of them all the time, almost every day. And so it's not to say almost, it is every day. But she, for some reason, thought that, and I thought, little did I know, I was going to need to be able to type very, very fast and type thousands and thousands of words. And so there's just been this path that has been building and this foundation that I believe God laid for me, and he just didn't allow me to see it until he was ready for me to. And when I was ready to move forward with this, and that's why I think it took me so long. But I do believe that writing and speaking to people, is my purpose. I honestly do, because that's when I'm feeling the most comfortable.
That's wonderful. And I always say to people, when you feel that twitching in your insides, that thing that just makes you just jump with joy that you're doing, that's your passion, because you can do it forever. You actually have to stop yourself so you can get some other things done.
And you do. You really do. That's for sure. It's like sometimes I remember about 2, maybe 3 years ago, I was at an event, a library event in Nashville, and so I was speaking, and I had spoken for about 20 minutes or so, and then took questions, and so there were maybe about 200 women that showed up for it, and so there were all kinds of questions that kept going, and so I looked over at my husband, and I saw him, you take your finger and you rub it across your neck like cut, and so I saw him do that, and I just kind of, well, I wonder why he's doing that, but I didn't pay him any attention. I was like, I went on to the next question, and it kept going. Well, what I didn't know was that I had been taking questions for an hour. I mean, I literally could have just kept doing that all night. And the librarian was asking my husband, I don't want to be rude, but how do I kind of have her tone it down? We need to get to the signing because the library, the building's going to close. And so, but I could just do that sort of thing forever, honestly.
Yes, I truly understand. And that's a gift and a passion. I truly understand that.
Yeah.
I want to take a couple of more questions that's coming from the chat room. What tips would you give to children and young people who exhibit an interest in becoming an author? And are there organizations for young writers that focus on helping them develop their gifts and interests? That's coming from Minister Cheryl.
Okay, yes. And there definitely are various organizations, and I would say research those online. I'm not as familiar with many of them now just because I'm so busy with my career and I've been doing it for so long that I just don't take the time to really look. But I know there's lots of writers' conferences and there's lots of writers' courses, not where you have to even take them for entire semesters, but you can go to your community colleges and look at the continuing education courses. Some of the really great ones are offered there. But the main thing is to write every single day, even if it's just a paragraph or a page, so that you stay on track and you just sort of stay in the groove of writing. And I don't always take that advice. It's part of the best advice that I've been given since I started writing. Walter Mosley gives me the business about that every time I see him, if the subject comes up, because he writes at least 3 hours every single day of his life. It doesn't matter if he's traveling on the road, whatever, if he's in a hotel, it doesn't matter. That's what he does. He's like, and so that way you're never crunched for time, you're never fighting to meet a deadline, and you even start backlogging books. You always have something available to turn in, and so, you know, you never get out of the practice of writing, and so I just think that's the best advice for both young people and adults. And then once you're writing and as you begin to start finishing it up, start learning as much as you can about the business of publishing, what you're going to have to do to get your book out there. It's one thing to get it published, and even if you have a major publisher who acquires your work, you can find a literary agent to represent you. You still need to work just as hard as a person who is self-published, a person who starts on their own, because the books are just not going to fly off the shelves just because the publisher has put them there. You've got to make sure people know about it. You've got to stay communicated and very well connected with readers and who your potential reading audience will be, and so learn as much. I always tell people, most people don't necessarily think this or want to hear it, but writing to a certain extent is about 20% of what I do throughout the year. The marketing and staying in touch with my readers is the other 80%.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Because, like I always say, it doesn't make a difference if you wrote something if no one knows about it.
Exactly.
And for us, when you're a writer, that really is the easiest part because you're doing what you love. The hardest part is getting it out into the hands of your targeted audience. So
it sure is.
Another question coming from the chat room: what obstacles would you tell upcoming authors to be aware of, to look out for?
Well, obstacles, definitely, again, figuring out who your audience is, because you can write a book, but as you're writing that book, you need to make sure it's not just for you. It's not just something that you would enjoy reading. Make sure it's something that lots of people will enjoy reading, and you're going to want to stay connected. Many times I'm on Facebook, I'm communicating with readers. Sometimes I'll do it by instant message. I'll just sit there, and people will see that I'm online, and that will pop up. Not everybody and every author is willing to do that because they have so much else to do. We have so many other things on our plates. Really get out there and do the book signing events and any speaking engagements that you're offered. Starting out, even if they're not willing to pay you a dime for it, still say yes to it, still do your very best, the same as you were being paid $5,000 for it. So it's really, really focusing on what you're going to do to promote your book and build your audience. Make sure you have a really nice website so that people can go to find out about you, read excerpts from your book, see what you're doing all the time. Have a spot where they can sign up for a mailing list, start sending out newsletters to them, keeping them abreast of what you're doing on a regular basis. Also.
Yes, and I agree. And with that thought, I want to say I love the new look to your new website.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, and I hadn't even had a chance to tell anybody yet. It was just launched last night.
Oh yeah, give me your website so I can put it in the chat room.
Yes, it's www.kimroby.com.
Okay, it's in the chat room now for all to be able to go to when they get a chance. Another question that someone is asking. Do you write for multiple publishers or one, and how many books do you commit to writing per year?
Okay. I do write for one publisher at a time. I'm with my third one now. I started out my career as a self-published writer, went through that whole process that some people may know who are listening. If you've tried to get published, but got tons of rejection letters from agents as well as publishing houses. And so then my mom kept saying, you shouldn't give up. People here are reading the manuscript and the copies, and they're saying they can't put it down. My husband kept saying, your background is in business. Why can't you start your own company and publish the book yourself? And so I ended up doing that and had success with it. Then I found an agent, and she sold my second book to Kensington Publishing, who is the actual publisher of what is now called the Defina line.
Right, I've heard
publishes
that. Yeah.
Their African-American titles, yes. So I did books 2, 3, and 4 with them, and then I signed with William Morrow, which is in print under HarperCollins, for books 6 through 14, the book that's coming out tomorrow. I just recently signed a new 4-book deal with Karen Thomas, who is an executive editor at Grand Central Publishing, and ironically was my very first editor that I ever had when I was with Kensington. And so, I feel like my career and all of that has come full circle. I'm back with her. Grand Central has already proven to be, just in the last couple of months, very supportive and people who really, really support what I'm doing, and they're excited and enthusiastic about what I'm doing. And so I am doing 2 books a year with them for 2011 and 2012. I'll do a novel in January, a novella halfway through the year, and then the same thing in 2012.
Okay. That's wonderful. That's one busy lady.